Since World War III is trending on social media as a result of President Trump's ordering of the assassination of one of the most high-level and influential leaders in the Iranian government and military, I figured I'd reach out to some of my foreign policy and national security expert friends to get their takes. Here's a teaser. Subscribe to the Stand Up with Pete Dominick podcast now to hear the full special, which drops Monday, January 6th. President of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haas. What do you make of the president's threats on Twitter to retaliate against cultural sites in Iran?
Yeah, it's wrong in so many ways. It's a violation of the laws of war. It alienates the Iranian people because everybody then rallies around not just the flag, but they rally around their civilization. This is not what the United States should be doing or saying to the world. But most important, I would have thought that now the time had come, and even the Secretary of State was saying the time had come to de-escalate, to calm things down. And when the president does tweets like that, unless I'm missing something, that would not come out of my textbook of how to calm things down.
Combat veteran of the Vietnam War, author, historian, Andrew Bacevich. And so with this killing, you say Trump has effectively thrown in the towel. So much for non-intervention, apparently.
Well, we may be in one of those moments when the passage of 24 hours renders my brilliant analysis obsolete. And what I mean by that is this. The latest development out of Baghdad is that the Iraqi parliament is demanding the withdrawal of all foreign forces, meaning us, and I guess a handful of Brits. That's about it. Whether or not we are going to respect the decision of a nominally sovereign state, I think is a big question. But if we do, if Trump says, okay, we're out of here, then, oddly enough, in the wake of the Soleimani assassination, he will be in a position to say that he finally ended at least that phase of the global war on terrorism. And in an election year, he'll score some big points, even if his decision is not particularly responsible, but politically it must be attractive to him.
Robin Wright at The New Yorker. What were some of your top line reactions before you went to your keyboard to start writing up your very important story?
Well, to be honest with you, I was dumbstruck. This is a man who was widely considered to be untouchable, that he was incredibly not only manipulative, but he was incredibly clever about circumventing or preventing, some kind of operation that would take him out. There had been consideration both by the Bush administration and the Obama administration, but they decided it was too big a risk because of the potential consequences, the kind of threats we're now seeing from Iran. So they opted not to challenge him physically or militarily. So this is, in many ways, something that can be considered as an act of war. Unlike Jamal Khashoggi, which you mentioned, he was a Saudi citizen taken out by his own government. This is the United States taking out the most prominent military leader in Iran, one of the three most powerful men in Iran. And if Iran had assassinated the head of U.S. Central Command, which oversees all of our operations in the Middle East and South Asia, we would certainly consider that an act of war. And what was numbing to me was the fallout from this. How does this play out? I lived in Lebanon in 1983 when the U.S. challenged a Muslim militia. We had been peacekeepers in Lebanon, and suddenly we decided to carry out a military operation against one of the parties to the civil war. And 34 days later, there was a suicide bombing of the Marine peacekeepers that killed 241 Marines. It was the largest loss of life in a single act since World War II, and that is still true today. So we have to be very careful and thoughtful about gaming our military strategy, and also thinking through what comes next and what's the exit ramp in case there are more hostilities. And my deep concern is that there was a decision to do this, and there hadn't been a strategy developed in terms of what happens if Iran, challenges us militarily. Do we then strike back? Does this escalate to the point that we're sucked into yet another Middle East war? So my first reaction was to think, oh my God, what's next?
Iran U.S. expert and author, Dr. Treati Parsi.
We went into Iraq almost 20 years ago. We know now that we were lied to throughout the entire Afghanistan war, that from the very outset, decision makers did not believe that there was a likelihood of success in Afghanistan. Yet they kept on saying that, we're going to turn a corner soon. We just need more troops. We just need to do this. 18 years later, we're still there, have no idea what success looks like, have no idea what the path to success would be. At some point, Washington is going to have to answer the question that the American public is asking themselves, which is, why are we there?
Army combat veteran of the Iraq War and author Matt Gallagher. What would you say to a young man or woman who may be considering signing up for Trump's war?
Oh, God. I'll admit to being very, very torn on this issue. On one hand, I'm very proud that I'm part of a country that still produces young people who are bold and courageous enough to want to serve in uniform. On the other hand, I'd probably suggest, unless they were really dead set on it, maybe give it a couple years, see how this thing plays out. Because, even on Twitter, I got a lot of responses yesterday from service members from my war, from Desert Storm, anything and everything in between, sharing personal stories of how they've advised their own kids not to serve, that they're still proud of their own service, that, in some cases, they've earned educational benefits and economic and social mobility that otherwise would not have been afforded to them. And they're applying that to advise their children to do anything but serve in the military. I found that really, really powerful, and also deeply, deeply sad, because these are committed patriots who are seeing what's happening and saying, no more, not for my kid.
Former FBI special agent and president of the Soufan group, Ali Soufan. What are the threats to the United States of America? What are your concerns for our national security?
I think over here, even though they have probably sleeper cells that can do terrorist attacks, but I really doubt that they will do that. I think we have the capability to prevent and detect any threats from Iran or its proxies. I think the Iranians also won't target civilians. I think they want to keep the war as a military war and as a geopolitical competition between them and the United States. They don't want to lose any of the international sympathy that they might have. But I think Iran have a very strong asymmetrical presence, thanks to Qasem Soleimani. Presence that he has been building for the last 2 decades, the one that we talked about. And a lot of these militias, like the Houthis, like Hezbollah, like the PMFs, like many different factions in Syria, will be part of the Iranian response. Iran's strategy is not based on a conventional warfare. Their defensive strategy is based on asymmetrical warfare. I think they learned a lesson from Saddam Hussein that you can never stand up against the American military. But you, on the other hand, can give the Americans hell by attacking asymmetrically in many different areas around the Middle East, in a way similar to what Hezbollah did in the 80s and 90s against Israel. So I think this probably will be their plan of attack. It will be a plan that will continue the strategy of Qasem Soleimani in the Middle East and ultimately try to accomplish his goals. And his goals is to get the United States out of the region.
Former State Department Middle East analyst, advisor, and negotiator to both Republican and Democratic administrations, and senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment, Aaron David Miller.
The fact that we could kill him and we're willing to openly take credit for it in the Pentagon statement today doesn't mean we should have killed him. And that, in the end, is the great unknown here. If you ask me today, I'm just riffing off of the administration's own talking points. If you ask me today to agree with Mike Pompeo, who said this morning on CNN that Americans are safer now, that Soleimani is gone, given the fact that his own State Department an hour before advised Americans to depart Iraq, all Americans to depart Iraq, the answer would be no, Americans aren't safer. If you ask me to agree with the Pentagon statement, which said that this was done as a defensive action, presumably we may or may not see the intelligence of an imminent operation on which this strike was based. But if you ask me, will this deter Iran from launching additional attacks? I would say no. If you ask me, will this make our position in Iraq? The Iraqi government is obviously caught in the middle, would be an understatement by this, since we're there at their invitation, and we did this at their airport in Baghdad. Whether or not our position in Iraq, in which we've invested thousands of American lives and trillions of dollars, is now more secure than ever, I would say absolutely not. So that to me is the critical question. If it turns out that the Iranians are so cowed by this that they don't respond, and somehow a way could be found to settle things up with the government of Iraq, and you don't end up with a Hezbollah-Israeli cross-border war, which everyone legitimately fears, I would say, well done, Trump administration. But that would defy the political laws of gravity in this region. So I'm more worried now about the prospects of a major confrontation between the United States and Iran than at any point in the last 25 years.
Thank you to all my guests. Subscribe to the Stand Up with Pete Dominick podcast, wherever you get your podcasts right now. Listen to the full conversations dropping Monday, January 6th at 4 a.m.